Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 2012 Professor Messer Live A+ Study Group. It's a study group that we do every week so that you can join in, ask questions, maybe even learn something as we go through this. I get your questions all throughout the month, so I try to compile all of them together, at least get the ones that are most popular and a few that are pretty interesting on the side, and we end up talking for an hour or so about those things once a month. For those of you that like to watch these live, if you'd like to participate, we've got almost 100 people in the chat room right now ready to talk back and forth. I've got people in the chat room for my Ustream feed. There are people on the live chat room on the Professor Messer website. If you want to go to professormesser.com/calendar, you can see when the next study group is going to be, and you can also participate live. So if you're watching this in a recording, there's another opportunity for you to actually come in and participate directly. And I like to look at the chat room. You guys are great about giving feedback. These things usually will last about an hour or so. Sometimes I go a little bit less, sometimes I go a little bit over, but there's a lot of content in there. So you'll be able to see exactly what is going on with this. Well, as we're stepping through this, I'm going to move us over so we can actually see what I've got going on the study group this month. This study group, by the way, one of the things that is nice about this study group is I'm able to do this because of the generosity of people who help support the site. One of the things that does help is people that take these free videos that I have available and you'd like to watch them offline. Those people who have purchased those offline version of the videos are perhaps, you can think of them as patrons of this particular study group. So I certainly appreciate the generosity of those people. It helps me able to do things like this and be able to present these things. If you'd like to see more about our offline version of these videos that include MP3 files and PDF links and so much more, you can see them at professormesser.com/download-A+, A-P-L-U-S, and you'll be able to also look at those as well. Now, if you already have your A+ certification and you are working towards continuing education units, and we'll talk more about what those are later in the study group, there is also something for you here because you are able, this is the link, if I get rid of my face here, there's the link. You actually, for CompTIA A+, you can get as many as 4 continuing education units just for participating in an industry event, seminar, workshop, podcast, webinar, or conference. And this certainly qualifies for that. So if you're accumulating these number of hours to renew your A+ certification, this could potentially work towards doing that. I personally think that people will be using other ways to upgrade their A+, but we'll talk about some easier ways to upgrade your A+ later on in the study group today. There is also an interesting story that I saw during the week, and I wanted to make you aware of it because I found it really interesting. It's not necessarily about A+, but here's what it is. This is from flowingdata.com. And you can see the URL is here. It's a relatively recent. It's from the 11th of April. And it talks about how recruiters look at your resume. You know what? Let's just bring up the article. I'm going to come off of my formal presentation here. And let's just go to this website. I'm going to select the whole thing. And I think I have a Chrome down here that's already running with things. Let's have a look at this story. What I found interesting about this story, because a lot of people will say, how should I set up my resume? How should I get this going? And I thought this was a good thing to at least make you aware of. I've gone into interviews before where I have worked so hard on the resume, on the CV, the curriculum vitae, or the resume, depending on where you are in the world. And I've worked so hard to have as much information as detailed as possible, but as succinct as possible to fit it into a single page or into 2 pages. And I walk in, they've not read it. In fact, that's the first time they're seeing it. They even ask me, do you have a copy of your resume? Well, yes, here it is. So all of the things that I've been working so hard to make people aware of in that interview, they look at the top page or even the first part of the top page, they're done. And I thought, well, gosh, this is just one of those things where I just happen to catch somebody at a bad time. Well, it turns out that's how everybody does it. That's it right there. This study looked at how people look at resumes. This is a study done by the ladders of N = 30. They went to recruiters, how recruiters look at resumes and make judgments. They spend about 6 seconds, 6, S-I-X, more than 5, less than 7, looking at your resume. They look for 6 main things: name, current company and title, previous company and title, previous position start and end dates, current position start and end dates, and education. That's it. You're lucky if they look at more than that. Wow. That was such in many ways revealing to me, but in many ways confirming what I already knew about people that were doing this. So as you go through your A+ certification, make sure you fit it into your education part. Here's one that has the education at the top. So fit it into your education section. Here's one that has education at the bottom, and you can see they were looking down at those. What just amazing. Go out to Flowing Data, just search for recruiters and resume. I'll put this also in the link notes for this out on YouTube and on the website, on the Professor Messer website. So you can find this. Very remarkable. And the comment was even made in here. This is almost like search engine optimization for a resume. Yes, don't put your certifications on page 2 at the bottom. Put it under education. Put it right there so they see I have a degree from here, I have a degree from here, and I have these certifications. Put them right there. You got 6 seconds. Make them worthwhile. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that shocking? It was remarkable. I was blown away when I saw that, so I had to share that with you. Just one of those things that is something just really, really unusual. You don't really see that very often. Okay, let's get into actually doing this particular piece. I see Jamie. Thank you for putting a link in the chat. That's on the Professor Messer website. So those of you that want to go there can go there right away if you go to the live A+ study group chat that's in there. So you'll be able to see that. You know, this is something we do every month. I take all of your questions you send me all throughout the month. I compile them. I have an enormous spreadsheet full of your questions. And I sit there and I go through all of them. And I get a number of questions constantly over and over and over again. I get a number of questions that don't necessarily apply to what we're doing. I get other questions that are for Network Plus and A+. So I sort through all of them. And this is what we put together, is this hour of Q&A where we go back and forth. And I'm sorry if I'm not able to get to your question. I literally get hundreds of questions. I try to get to as many as I can. But if there's something that's really pressing with you, go to the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link right at the top. That shows up on my phone, which I say is a great thing to do, but I'm looking around and my phone's not in here. So maybe not the best thing to do right now. But usually it's sitting right with me. It's connected surgically at my hip. It's in my pocket. That's where it goes. So every time you send me a message there, even if I don't reply back, because I get a lot of them, I do see it. I see every single one of them. I read all of my emails, and I try to reply back to as many as I can. You can also send me a tweet, either at me, at Professor Messer on Twitter. You can leave them on Facebook. I try to get back with everybody when I can. So there's some good stuff there. Now, one of the questions I got this week was from Edward, and the question to start us off was, who let the dogs out? Now, Edward, I don't know exactly who let the dogs out. I thought it was a good question. I don't know how it applied to A+ necessarily, but certainly it applied to something. But I thought instead of me answering that, we're going to do something a little different. Some of you have been on a previous study group where we did this, where you don't necessarily have me answer the question. I'm going to have you answer the question, and we're going to do it live. This is a technology that allows me to do live polls with you. So if you want to pop open a new tab in your browser and go to pollev, Pollev, as in victor.com/Messer, you can answer this question, which was, who let the dogs out? And you can also use SMS if you're in the United States. You can text this code that's next to each one of these to 37607. And you can see the options are, who let the dogs out? Woof, woof, woof. There is, wait for y'all, my dogs. I let the dogs out. Or, I see ya little speedboat head up our coast. There you go. I'm hip. I'm with the kids. I know what's going on. You go to pollev.com/Messer right there at the top of the page, pollev.com/Messer, and you can answer these. We've already gotten 6 results in. And what's interesting about being able to do this is I'm able to actually see these. So you can see as people vote, we get to see exactly what people are voting on. Y'all let the dogs out. I let the dogs out. It's y'all because I'm here in the South. I'm in Florida. So it's y'all. So there's not a bad answer for this one. Apparently, wait for y'all, my dogs is not getting any love. We have zeros in for that. We're going to be using this technology throughout the study group. I have some Q&A in here. I have some pop quiz questions we're going to go through. Just something so that I can get some feedback from you guys as well. Yeah, I try to stay up with the kids, trying to get trying to be hip, got my street cred on with that piece. So that's one of the things. So nice that we have that technology there and able to use it. But let's do some real work now. We've gone through some resumes. I've told you what this is all about. Let's jump into doing some of the exam content. You've sent me some questions, so let's do some questions. The one I got, and this wasn't just one question, I got a number of questions about this, is what is this cache memory thing? And it's a really good question because we go over kind of like the first part of this. We go over the very high level views of cache memory, and sometimes knowing a little bit more about what's going under the surface is really a lot more helpful to be able to understand what's happening here. Now, for those of you that have actually looked at a die, if you go out to Google and you search for Intel CPU die, DIE, that's what you call that little map of what's going on the CPU, you can start to see that there are, especially a die map that's annotated, you can see where the cache memory actually is. We're going to look at this in just a moment. Cache memory is usually it's right on the CPU. This is CPU cache memory. There's other caches that you can have on your system. There's a hard drive cache. There are other places where you can have caches. We're talking about cache memory that's on a CPU specifically for this question. Cache memory is really, really, really fast memory. And there's not a lot of it on a CPU. But it's so fast, it's really expensive memory because it is so fast, and it usually holds instructions because you can only do one thing with a CPU at a time. It receives an instruction, a couple of instructions, it receives some data, it processes the data, it goes to the next instruction, and just does that over and over and over and over again. Now, one of the challenges is your CPU is going so fast, it can process hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of instructions in the time that it takes to actually retrieve data. And this is why cache is so useful. Imagine if there was no cache. The CPU would perform an instruction and then would have to go out and get more information, get more instructions, get more data, pull those back into the CPU, process those. In the meantime, it could have processed hundreds of other instructions. Well, the way that you increase the performance of the CPU is you have everything just queued up waiting to go. And you queue it up in this cache effectively. What you're really doing is putting the things you're using the most right here in the cache. And anytime it needs an instruction, pulls it off of that fast memory. It's able to do it very, 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 very quickly. And it's able to pull up other things and do them quickly. There's even other technologies like hyper-threading where you have multiple threads performing at the same time. So while you're waiting with one thread, another thread can be doing something else. So really nice to have this cache memory in here. It used to be that cache on level 1 cache is the first cache that the CPU would use. Usually level 1 holds just instructions, but that level 1 cache is usually right there on the chip. And it used to be that was the only cache memory that was right on the chip. These days you have level 1, level 2, and level 3 caches all on the chip. All the newest processors certainly do. Now you don't have to know what cache is on the chip and what caches are not on the chip on a per CPU basis. All you have to know for your A+ is what this does for you and how valuable this can be to help speed up the performance of your computer. Level 2 cache is usually both instructions and data. Level 3 cache is also instructions and data, and it's right there on your CPU. Let's look at this. So I have a CPU right here. Let's pull this up. So this is one from Intel. It's a relatively new type of chip they call the Sandy Bridge chip. Every chip has a different annotation, a different acronym or a abbreviation or some type of name associated with it. It's what they use internally to call this chip. This is the Sandy Bridge CPU. And you can see in here, this happens to be a quad-core version of that. There are 4 cores inside the chip, and you can see them. They're absolutely duplicated. They look exactly the same. Processor graphics are built into the Sandy Bridge CPU. Your system agent and memory controller. The memory controller itself is on the CPU now. You know, we used to, on the A+, you have to know what a north bridge is and a south bridge is. The north bridge is your memory controller. It handles the communication from the CPU, grabs the memory, and puts it back to the CPU. The north bridge is on the chip now. It's on the CPU itself. This is very, very powerful and very, very fast to have your north bridge effectively right here. The only thing your CPU now has to do is talk directly to memory. And that greatly simplifies things for your motherboards, and it makes things much, much, much faster. It's interesting that that's happening in what we're doing. And as you see new things that are going to be happening with A+, certainly the new A+ 800 series will be out. Some of these changes will be inside of that. Just underneath the cores is the shared L3 cache. So right here, that third cache, you have a level 1 and level 2 cache on each of these cores, and level 3 cache is shared amongst all the cores. So it's interesting they're able to do this. And in the chat room, Julian D asked, are the processor graphics the same thing as integrated graphics? Yes, they are. So you've got ability to have those graphics built into this. The Intel graphics capability is on the Sandy Bridge CPU. Again, simplifying the motherboards, just building it into the basics. So if you're not doing World of Warcraft, you're not playing third-person shooters, you're not editing video, you can use that particular graphics to do your normal web browsing, to watch YouTube videos, and that type of thing. Very, very interesting to see that there. Here's your memory controller I/O is right here. Again, having that Northbridge functionality built right into the CPU. That's where your cache is. It's right there on the chip. And so that's why you're able to take all this memory coming in. The memory gets cached immediately. The things that you're asking for a lot in memory are in cache right there on the chip. Your instructions and data are cached in layer 1, or level 1 and level 2 cache right there on the CPU in each one of those cores. Very, very, very fast. And that's what your CPU cache is. So if you see any questions on that, and you've got on your exam, you're thinking, what benefit does this give me? Now you know exactly where that CPU cache is and where it works. Now, along the same lines, I get a number of questions, probably weekly, about the CPU chips themselves. And if you look at the exam requirements document for the CompTIA exam, in fact, let's do that. And the question, this comes from Amy, who spends a lot of time in the chat room on the Professor Messer website. At the bottom of the page is a chat room always there. And her question is there an easy way to remember all these CPU sockets and all the CPU slot types and all of those things? I get questions on this all the time about these pieces. So, of course, and what I want to do is look at that. I'm going to move off of this screen. Let's move this down because I've got right on my desktop. Now I've got all these screens open for you to see. I need to just get rid of them all. Here we go. And right here, I've got the CompTIA exam requirements. So here's the 701 exam requirements. And on the 701 exam requirements, one of the things that it asks about right in section 1 for the hardware is right down here. It talks about, one bullet says, you need to know about processor sockets. That's it. It doesn't tell you about processor. It doesn't tell you what sockets. It doesn't tell you I need to know a certain number of them. It just says I need to know about them. Now, one of the things that is very, very consistent with CompTIA is this exam requirements document is very detailed. So anytime they aren't giving you a lot of details, they're probably not going to be asking for a lot of details on the exam. What they're probably asking more about is what type of sockets would you expect to see? You may not be asked about what CPU goes with what sockets. If you were to look at the list of the total number of CPUs that goes with what sockets, holy cow, it would be huge, it'd be enormous. Nobody could memorize that. And you're not expected to. Let's flip back to the presentation. I'll give you a feel for what I mean with that. Got it right here, or I think I did. I think I moved it down to the bottom of the screen, didn't I? There we go. So let's have a look at some examples of this. One example is a slot. This is a slot. This is an old one from a Pentium 2, but it gives you an idea of what they look like. You're not going to see a lot of details about this. You'll want to know, here's a slot, here's PGA, the pin grid array type connectors that you would put on your PGA chips. Your CPUs fit right into those and how they work. You've also got other types of slots that are used for different manufacturers. And here's the same chart that I put. Yeah, those are the zero insertion force modules on the motherboard. That was asked, the shortcut asked that. Those are absolutely the ZIF modules that your PGA pinned CPUs fit right into. And so they're going to want you to know these types of interfaces and how they work. That's important. This level of detail, I gave an example of a few of these in the A+ videos that I did, and you can see the different slots, the different sockets, Some of them are socket A and slot A for the AMDs. Some of them are slot 1 and the sockets that are correlated back to the number of pins on the CPU, like a socket 423 has 423 pins. The socket 478 has 478 pins. That's about the level of detail you're going to need to know for your A+ exam. You are not going to need to know all of these millions of different CPUs and how they work and how they fit and what type of slot would you expect to see on a 64-bit i7 quad-core Intel CPU. You know, that's not a level of detail that you're not going to be asked about. And in the big scheme of things, what if they even did ask it? Let's look at how this fits into the big scheme of things. So if you looked at the A+ exam, the A+ exam has 6 domains associated with it, 6 different sections. If I flip back to just our 701, we're talking specifically about the 701 exam. Right here at the top, we have 6 different domains: hardware, troubleshooting, repair and maintenance, operating system and software, networking, security, and operational procedures. And then the one that deals with CPUs is this top domain, hardware. So if we're wondering how much from the hardware sections should we expect to see on the exam, 27% of the exam will be hardware. So already we know that there's a big chunk that will be hardware. Let's flip back to the presentation. So 27% of the exam, there are 11 sections in the hardware piece, 11 different total sections that deals with storage and motherboards and power and CPU, cooling and memory and displays and peripherals and adapter cards and laptops and printers. I put them all in here. That's a lot of hardware that you have to know about. Each one of those sections has a ton of things you need to know about each one of those pieces. Obviously, CPUs and the types of pins and the connectors are in the CPU section. Now, in that CPU section, it's under the motherboard components. You need to know there's 12 different topics under the motherboard components to be able to do that. And so when you start looking at what you need to have there for those different components, that's huge to have those total numbers. You're not going to be asked a lot. Even if you're asked about specific pins and specific pieces of those, there's very little that they could possibly ask you because there's so many other things that they have to get to. So don't get so deep in the weeds. Don't spend so much time studying slots and slot types and CPUs that fit into certain slots and CPUs that fit into certain. Certainly look at them and understand some of the differences and know some of the more popular ones. That might be a good thing to know because CompTIA even tells you, we might ask something that's not on this piece of paper. They tell you straight up. We may absolutely ask you something we didn't write down. So you do need to know a little bit about that just as a buffer, but don't waste your time through the details. Here's one of the specific sockets. One person said, only 2 questions about specific sockets. I had to go through and learn all of them. Only got 2 questions. And I would expect those 2 questions are going to be, do not tell us Vision for Day, but I would expect those particular types of questions are going to be on well-known, well-established sockets and how they fit. So know those basics that I mentioned to be able to do that. And only 2 questions, again, on that piece. Some people say on the chat say, I didn't get any questions on sockets because there's so much you would have to go through to be able to do that. So it's important to keep that in mind. Don't get stuck on spending so much time on this that you don't learn about RAID and you don't learn about troubleshooting Windows 7 and you don't understand about partitioning and you don't understand about all those other things you need to learn about because you're spending so much time memorizing 25 different CPUs and sockets. I see it all the time. Don't be trapped by that. Don't go through that group. So very important to keep that in mind. Let's go to, since we have a section here, a little place where we can stop and look at this, I thought it'd be good to do another question. I say that, but it's not loading up, is it? Oh, all the best. There it is. Which of these would be a reason for disabling DHCP on a wireless router? So a little bit of a networking question there about this. So which of these would be a reason for disabling DHCP on a wireless router? Would it be to improve the efficiency of the wireless connection process? Would it be to increase the total throughput of the wireless router? Would it be to remove additional CPU load from the wireless router? Would it be to keep non-authorized stations from easily communicating on the network? Or would it be E, remove the need of memorizing yet another acronym? Probably going with E on this one. You go to pollev.com/Messer. Please don't put the answer in the chat. Please leave it until we've looked at all of these. Go to pollev.com/Messer. You can answer that or text to 37607 the code that correlates back to this and being able to do that. So one of these, I like E2. I think E is a great question to be able to put this in here. Go to pollev.com/Messer. Please don't put the answer in the chat. Don't look at the chat, everybody. Don't pay any attention to the chat. Just give me your answer. Don't look at the chat. No chat. Put that up there. We've got some in. Let's see what people are saying about this. We're going to flip over to the results. And you can see D didn't fool too many people there. D, 76% of people said D. We've got a few people said it improves the efficiency of the wireless connection process. It really doesn't. The DHCP process is extremely fast, extremely efficient. It really doesn't speed up or slow down the efficiency, at least not at the human being level. Certainly there's a couple packets go back and forth, but generally not really. 9% of the people said it increases the total throughput of the wireless router. It doesn't. Having DHCP running has effectively no impact on the throughput of your router. It removes an additional CPU load from the wireless router. Nope, really doesn't provide much of a CPU load there either, so you'll get no benefit from a CPU load perspective. Obviously, D is the right answer here to keep non-authorized stations from easily communicating on the network. It obviously is not the only thing you should be doing to keep non-authorized stations, but that may be a good reason. That's the best reason out of these that you would be disabling DHCP on your wireless router. Thank you. Rob Sandberg says, of course, DHCP is the dynamic host configuration protocol that is important for you to be able to automatically receive IP addressing whenever you look at your whenever you connect to any network, both wired and wireless along those lines. And of course, 4% of you are just wiseacres that said remove the need of memorizing yet another acronym. And you know what? There's a special place in my heart for the wise guys out there being able to do that. So thanks for answering the question. Thanks for participating. I've got another question coming up in just a bit. Let's go through another question, though, that you sent me this week. And this question was, how do you rebuild a RAID 0? OP asked this one, and this was a really good one. I get a lot of RAID questions throughout the week, and I thought this one was a really good question to ask about rebuilding RAID arrays. And if you've ever looked at RAID and how it operates, you know that RAID is one where you've got a lot of different options. Generally, it's this hot pluggable thing. You're replacing drives whenever they fail, that type of thing. A lot of good stuff in there to be able to look at. So I wanted to go through first RAID itself to get an idea and an understanding of exactly how RAID works so that you've really got this straight in your mind. This is another thing. People ask a lot of questions. I'm concerned that people are spending a lot of time having to go through this piece. Don't spend a lot of time on it because the main ideas of RAID are relatively simple. RAID itself stands for Redundant Array of Inexpensive Disks, although the more appropriate name these days is call them a Redundant Array of Independent Disks. We called them inexpensive originally because, generally speaking, hard drives that are in laptops, hard drives that were in desktops, were much less expensive than hard drives that were on mainframes. And that was what we compared them to at the time. This is not backing up, by the way. This is a way to create some additional capabilities for you to be able to store data on your local hard drives on your computer. So it's very, very important that the NetDmin in the chat room says, make sure you keep backing up. This is not a backup. This sounds like somebody who's had to go back and fix a scenario where somebody was not backing up because I have RAID. Why do I need to back up? Also keep in mind, not all RAID is redundant. Not all RAID allows you to keep running when a drive fails. But wait, it says in the name, Redundant Array of Inexpensive Disks. How can it not be redundant? Indeed. In fact, the part that's not redundant, if you had zero redundancy, that would be a RAID 0. That's the best way to remember that one. RAID 0 is what we call striping. This is a picture right here that shows how data is written to this redundant array of independent disk. It takes part of a file and it writes part of the file to two separate drives, two separate disks, two separate partitions even. Generally, you do these on separate disks themselves. So part of the file you'd write on one disk, part of the file you'd write on the other disk. Well, gosh, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just fill up one and then fill up the other? Well, one of the reasons is that hard drives are, generally speaking, very slow to read and write data. The memory that's in your computer is much faster. And that's why SSDs have become so popular, because they're so fast. You don't have to have a RAID 0 if you're running an SSD, because that's effectively as fast as memory. It's certainly near to the closeness of being able to do that. One of the advantages here is because you're writing part of the data to one drive and part of the data to another physical hard drive, you can write data faster. You don't have to wait for all of that to be written to a single drive. And ideally, that even speeds things up. In some RAID 0 scenarios, you even have separate hard drive controllers to separate the load across all of those. So it improves and really speeds things up very, very nicely. Now, the problem is that half your data is on one and half your data is on the other. If I lose this drive right here, boom, that drive goes away. That's it. You've lost half the data. You've lost half of a file, because part of the file is written to one and part of the file is written to another. It's not even like half your files go away. Everything goes away. It's like losing one hard drive. You've lost everything. RAID 0 is redundancy 0. There's zero redundancy built into this. Don't be in a situation where you've got that problem. It does help with speed. If you're writing a lot of data, boy, that can be fast, and you're using hard drives to do that, it can really speed things up. Just keep in mind that it's not redundant at all. So we go back to the question that was originally asked: how do I take this RAID 0 and rebuild it? You go get a backup. You go get the backup that you, of course, set up on this system to run every night and create an entire image of this entire computer. And of course you did that, didn't you? That's the smart thing to do. Absolutely have that there. So you get a new drive, you replace the bad drive, you tell it, I've now replaced, you tell your RAID array, here's my new drive, it's a new one. And the RAID array says, okay, what do you want to do now? Because I only got half the data. Oh, I'm going to reimage the whole thing. Boom, there you go. We've reimaged our computer. So hopefully within minutes, you'll be up and running. If you've ever done a reimaging of an entire system, it only takes a number of minutes. As fast as you can copy the data, your system's up and running. So ideally, your backup and recovery, you've got that running perfectly, and that's what you're going to need for RAID 0. Now, the question comes up about the other RAID configurations. That's one of the things that you run into that does have redundancy. Everything else in RAID is redundant. It's 0 that's not. RAID 1 is an exact duplicate. It is a mirror. Everything you write to one physical drive is written to another physical drive. There they are right there. So block 1 and block 1, they're duplicated on each individual drive. You're obviously spending a lot of money now. You're effectively having to buy twice as much hard drives to store half the space. I want to think of it that way. I have to have 2 terabyte hard drives. How much total space do I have? 2 terabyte. Even though I bought 4 terabytes. Sorry, you got 2 terabytes that you can use. Now, the benefit of this, of course, is if you lose one, obviously I have an exact duplicate right next to it. That's really nice. That's a really nice feature. Again, that doesn't help you with backups. That only helps you if a hard drive goes bad. If you still need to recover a file you deleted last week, this isn't going to help you. When you delete the file on one, it deletes the file on the other one. So you still have to make sure you have those backups. But this is a really good way to have some redundancy built in. It's very simple, very easy to understand, and it's a duplicate. Very nice to have that there. RAID 5 is the part that makes people a little crazy. Like, how does this work? RAID 5 is called striping with parity. Well, we saw striping before in RAID 0. Striping didn't provide us with any redundancy, but with RAID 5, striping allows us to be redundant. So we have the speed of RAID 0 combined with redundancy to actually give us a pretty nice way to store data. In fact, in many data centers, they're using RAID 5 to do this, primarily because you're not duplicating drive space. You're only using a little bit more drive space, and you're able to have a lot of speed because you have multiple disks, and you're able to have redundancy. Here's how it works. This is a very simplified way to look at this, but we write a single block of data. We'll write it across 4 different disks. What we really do is write it against 3 different disks. We put a little bit on this disk, we put a bit on this disk, we put a bit on this disk, and then we look at all of those bits and we calculate a parity bit. And the reason we do that is if we were to lose this bit, we could still figure out what it was based on what the parity is. If you go back to one of our earlier study groups, we actually went through the process of calculating parity and how it works. You don't have to know that for the A+ exam, but it was an interesting exercise to go through the process of what does your hard drive controller do to get to that parity. So this is nice. I've got the speed of RAID 0. I've got the redundancy now built into this because I've got my parity. If I lose any of these disks, let's say I lose disk number 2 right here. If disk number 2 goes away, it will simply, our hard drive controller will simply recalculate everything that's there if I'm in a hardware RAID. If you're in software RAID, the CPU of your computer has to do all of that in the main CPU. So you may see a slowdown when you lose a drive because it has to do more work. It has to look at this and look at the parity and figure out what the bit was and reconstruct the data and then provide the data to you. So it's something to keep in mind. When you're in RAID 1, you'll never know if a drive fails unless you're watching it. I was very early on in my networking career, I walked into a Novell environment that was running a RAID array of a RAID 1. One of the drives was bad. It had been bad for months. It failed months ago. And I said, "You got a bad drive here. Did you know that?" Like, "No, we had no idea." They'd been running on one drive for months, but RAID 1's great. They didn't have to worry about it. RAID 5, you may see a performance difference if you are in a hardware RAID where all of your RAID functionality is being done on the hard drive controller itself. You may not see any redundant or any slowdown associated with that because of that piece. So very interesting to see that there. So the answer, going back to the original question, RAID 0, the way that you rebuild RAID 0, you rebuild your computer. You get your backup. No other way to do it. If you're running RAID 1 and you've got mirror drives, one of those drives goes bad, if you've ever done this, it's the coolest thing ever. Usually these are hot swappable. These RAID drive chassis that you have, you pull out the old drive while the machine's turned on, make sure you pick the right one, pull out the drive that's bad, grab the brand new drive, it's a duplicate, you plug it in there, and the RAID array recognizes, oh, there's a new drive here. Oh, that's the one you want to use this one for the new machine? Okay, great, let's use that. And it copies everything back over and rebuilds itself. Now that takes some time for that to happen, but it rebuilds itself, and in an hour or 2 hours or more, depending on the size of the drive, could be all day. Finally, the drives are synced up again, and everything's back the way it was. Coolest thing ever. RAID 5 works the same way. You figure out which drive is bad. Usually they'll even have lights on the chassis itself to tell you it's this drive right here. Pull that one. Pull out the bad drive, plug in the new drive. While everything is running, it rebuilds the drive. Fantastic. RAID 0 can't do that. So there's your answer on RAIDs and how it works and how all of these things happen. For your A+, there's different types of RAID type configurations, but for your A+, you need to know RAID 0, you need to know RAID 1, you need to know RAID 5. So check the chat room, make sure we're covered as far as questions are concerned. You've got some different things there. Some people asking about RAID 10. We won't be going into any of the RAID 10s or the RAID 1+0s or any of those things. Go out to Wikipedia. They got plenty on it. We don't need to know that for the A+ exam, however, but some really nice, interesting things with RAID and being able to do that. Quite a bit of nice things associated with that. So let's talk, let's do another question. Only got a couple more of these in here, and I find them really interesting to do because I like to get the feedback from you and what you're doing. Which of these laptop communications methods requires a line of sight to work properly? We've got 802.11, we have Bluetooth, we have infrared, we have modem, we have CW. Don't answer in the chat room. Don't say it in the chat room. Go out to pollev.com/Messer and answer it right there. Got some results already coming in. CW, by the way, I'll just, for those of you wondering, what the heck, what is CW? That's my little attempt at humor at the bottom. CW, for those of you that are into amateur radio or even some other things, that's Morse code. So does Morse code require a line of sight to work properly? Probably not. Since you can talk to people line of sight over CW, not line of sight, you can talk to them on the other side of the world. You certainly don't need it for that. Let's see what people have said. We have 26 people already have answered this. The results of this are not there. That's the wrong button. It's right there. All you guys know immediately that C, the vast majority, 88% of you had said, yeah, that's infrared. 802.11 does not need line of sight. 6% of you said that, but obviously you can go all over the place with your 802.11 wireless network. You don't have to have line of sight to your access point. And Bluetooth does not need line of sight. It helps. But Bluetooth does not require line of sight. Infrared absolutely does. You don't see much infrared any longer. I don't even remember if infrared was on the newest A+ exam or not. have to look at that. And we'll talk more about the 801 in just a bit. It's not on there. NetDmin says it's not on there. Maybe. Is that what we're talking about? Maybe so. So let's go and now talk a little bit more about some interesting things. One of the questions that came up was, and I get these questions all the time, and Adonai is just one of the people out of many that ask, can we get into the command line? What is this command line thing? I'm used to using Windows. I use my mouse. I click on things. It's a beautiful, nice world to live in. And don't let anyone fool you, whether you're administering a Windows device, whether you're administering a Mac OS X device, whether you are administering a Linux device, there are some beautiful graphical user interfaces for you to be able to use, and it makes administration and usability of those devices very, very, very easy. But whether you are getting your A+ exam, your Network Plus exam, your Security Plus exam, your Microsoft exams, your Linux exams, everything that you'll take requires that you know command line. Well, why is that? If you can do everything in the graphical interface, why do I have to know the command line? And the answer, of course, is that you may be in a situation where that graphical interface is simply not available to you. You're going to have to start and stop services right there at the command line. You're going to need to move files around at the command line. You're going to need to do a lot of different things right there on the command line. And if you know the command line, you can do anything. There's some powerful scripting that you can do with PowerScript in Windows and scripting that you can do with other languages in Mac OS X and in Linux that give you an amazing amount of functionality. The more comfortable you are at the command line, the better off you're going to be. So let's have a look at this. I think I have a virtual machine I can pull up. But before we do that, let me show you what we're talking about. This is it. These are the operating systems you need to know to be able to work at the command, or the commands you need to know in the operating system to be able to pass your A+ exam. So things like dir, check disk, copy, xcopy, format. And notice the exam requirements document has exactly on here the flags you need to be able to know, the command line options that you need to know. For instance, for check disk, you need to know what /f and /r do. For ping, you need to understand the -t and the -l on here. This document, for those of you wondering, where's this document? What the heck are you talking about? This is the CompTIA exam requirements document. If you go out to Google and type CompTIA exam requirements, it will take you to the exact CompTIA webpage where if you don't have this downloaded already, make sure you download it. It tells you everything you have to know to pass your exam. Spells it completely out for you. If you've not seen this, go get it. This is the one best piece of documentation you will have to pass your exam, because this is a great big checklist. If you can go through this, yep, I know my msconfig, yep, I know dir, yep, I know check disk, yep, I know edit. You keep checking them off, you'll know pretty soon you've checked off everything, you're ready to take your exam. Great document to have there. A lot of good stuff that's in that piece. So this is one of the things that when you start looking at the command line, it can be a bit daunting. And I don't want you to get into the command line and worry that I'm not sure about this. I'm using this command line. I'm uncomfortable at the command line. It's not doing the things I want to do. Don't worry so much about that. I want you to be comfortable in doing these things. So I'm going to pop up a command line on my screen, and I'm going to see if I can get this up for you to see. There's me. There's me in two places, as a matter of fact. I'm running a Windows 7 here. So if you go into Windows 7, I know it's hard to see on my screen because I've got this at a very big resolution, but anytime you go into your command line or you run anything in Windows XP or just go to Windows 7 in the start box and do a CMD, it's going to pop up this command line. And what I'm going to do, let's make this a little bit bigger so that all of you can see this. I'm going to try to make my particular fonts here and my properties. Let's pull it up so it's nice and big. I'm going to go to the bottom of this. There, that should, I don't know if that font really works well for me. Let's try this one. See, is that bigger? It's not bigger at all, is it? It's about as good as we're going to get it to be. So I'm going to zoom up on it. There we go. So I think we're able to see that okay. So we've got a few things we can look at associated with that particular view. Now we can see on here, when you're at the command line, this is all you get. It's a blank. There's not much, that's not much there to help you with. You have to know everything yourself. Now, one of the advantages you have, let's see, does even question mark work? No, question mark doesn't work. What could we do here to help us out with this? Well, we have a few things available in Windows. If you type help, you get this page full of help. So there's plenty that you can do. And look at all of these commands you can do at the command line. You don't have to know all of these. Fortunately, we saw the list of things we need to know at the command line. So one of the things they did was the check disk, CHKDSK. That was one that we needed to know about. So if you're at the command line, let me clear this out. Type this out properly. So if you're at the command line, when this is zoomed up, it kind of looks funny. So I'm going to keep adjusting it on here. And we do a CHKDSK/?. That will tell you everything you need to know about the check disk command. If you do a CHKDSK or do a help CHKDSK, it effectively does the same thing. So there's two ways you can do this. You can do a help in the command, or you can do the command with a /?. The CompTIA exam expects you to be able to know both of those. So make sure you understand that. Now notice there's a lot of different options that came up for check disk. There were couple of options we needed to know about for check disk. You go back and look at these, and all you have to do is go back and reference your materials. You can go through and see what were those things we needed to know. There was a /F, there was the /V. There were so many different things to be able to understand with this piece. There were a couple of different commands, and as you step through each one that you need to know, you'll be able to see them. So if I do a check disk and a /F, that means that it's going to fix any problems it finds. And you may get this on yours. Let me see if I can make this so you can see it. It can't lock the current drive. It can't run because the volume is in use by another process. Would you like to schedule the volume next time the system restarts? So go through these command line parameters. Go through and understand what those different parameters mean. Here's another good one that they asked about was the ping command. And notice the ping command didn't use the slashes. The ping command used something different to be able to see it. It was a ping dash. If I just do a ping, for those of you that have done a ping command before, let me get this on here and scroll down so you can see it. You do a ping by itself and you type it properly, you get all these different options that come up. One of them was the -T, and one of them was, there's another one in there. I think the L was the buffer, so the size of them. But here's the ping -T says it pings a host until you stop it with Control-C. So this is one of those things that when you start looking at the commands, all the help that you need is right there. So if you simply do a ping command, I'm going to do a ping 8.8.8.8. I know this is really small on your screens, but I made it that size so you'd be able to see that piece. You just did a ping of 8888, which is Google. That's the Google view that allows you to ping Google's DNS. That 8888 is Google. So I just pinged Google and it did it 4 times and it said it's done. But if I do a ping -T and you spell it right, I'm typing on 2 different machines here, 8888 with the -T in it. Let me show you what that looks like. Here's the -T. So you've got some different things you can see on that. And if you hit enter, now the ping's just going to run. It's going to run. It's going to run. It's going to run. It's going to run. So we, of course, on the user group that we're doing here, the study session that we have going, we don't have time to go through every single one of those command line views. But don't be worried when you hop into the command line that you just get this blank screen that looks like that. Use the help command. Use the help with the things that you need to know about. Go through the list in your CompTIA requirements document and just get familiar with what's there. Some nice capabilities. Nick in the chat room gives another really good example of something you can do because we did a help and this ton of things came up. If you do a help and you use this something called a pipe, it's this little vertical line. So I did a help and I piped it to more. What that does is take the results of help and it pipes it out to a little command that does it a page at a time. It tells you here, instead of going through the entire page, it stops, lets you read the page, hit the space key, it does another page. Lets you hit the space key, does another page. If you hit the enter key, it does a line at a time. And of course, if you need to get out of all of that, you can simply Control-C and you can get out of the entire piece of it. So you can see everything that's there. So some nice ways to make it so that you don't have to keep scrolling up and scrolling up and scrolling up to see some of those things. Some nice little functions at the command line to be able to see these things. Some great capabilities, some great functionality there. And some really nice things to have available. We're going to talk more about that in a bit as we go out and look at some of the capabilities, that other command line things that we'll be able to do. Some really nice functionality there as well. And as you start working more with your command line, you're bringing up virtual machines. You don't have to know specifically about virtual machines when you are working on the CompTIA exam. There's no specific VM questions on the 700 series exam, but there are some nice functionalities to be able to run all of those different operating systems on your computer. I'm running on Mac OS X, but we just looked at Windows 7. I'm running in a virtual machine. I'm using VirtualBox, and I have videos that show you exactly how to do that. So if you wanted to do exactly the same thing that I'm doing here, you can absolutely do that piece. So an important piece of working with those really difficult to understand operating systems, having them all on one machine. You don't have to have separate machines. You don't have to boot into other operating systems. A really nice capability to be able to make that happen. One of the things that I wanted to talk about very quickly was some functionality that we have from our sponsor. And our sponsor this month is GTS Learning. They have a brand new A+ certification training system that they have created. And it is quite a remarkable system. There's a video out that we've created that we're putting out here. If you go to professormesser.com/freestyle, you'll be able to see this. They have taken all of their books, put them online. They've taken all of their Q&A. They've put it online. Those sample questions everybody always wants. Questions that help you at the end of every chapter. They're all online. They've taken my videos and integrated them within the online systems. So as you read about CPU sockets, you read about it on the screen, you take the questions that are associated with that. There's my video right there on CPU sockets. You can take and watch it exactly the same time. Really nice integration, all in one place, and very, very easy to use. One other nice thing about Freestyle is they have these sample exams that as you start asking questions and answering questions on these sample exams, if you get one wrong, it tells you what the answer was, and it points you back to the section of the book that talks about it, and it points you back to the video that talks about it. So all of those resources are right there and available to you. Really nice system they've got going there. They've got some also free capabilities. You can log in and get a piece of this absolutely free. This is I think throughout this month, they've got some specials going on that you'll be able to log in and take advantage of. If you want to see any of those, you can find them at professormesser.com/freestyle. Some really nice things there. They're also a big sponsor of what we do here at Professor Messer. I got a chance to visit with them back in November at their facility outside of London. Some great folks to work with. And I really like what they're doing here with Freestyle. I think some very, very well put together and well needed. We much needed capabilities because people ask me all the time, I need a book and I need videos and I need questions and I need something that can show me acronyms. It's all here. It's all in Freestyle. It's all right there. It was very smart of them to build this, I think. I should have done it first. Why didn't I think of that? They did it for me already. So GTS Learning's got it all sitting right there. Feel free to take advantage of them. And if you use professormesser.com/freestyle, it also helps the Professor Messer website. So I appreciate that as well. We got another question for you. Then we have some A+ questions after this. I see we're getting near the top of the hour. We're going to go over a little bit this week. Sorry about that. This question is, don't answer in the chat room, answer online. Let me pull this up so you can actually see it. You've identified a malware infection on a critical computer at your organization. What's the best process to ensure that the malware is completely eradicated? Now, for those of you that have been following my daily pop quizzes, I cheated a little bit here. This daily pop quiz, or this quiz that's here, is, well, gosh, we just did this one. This was one from earlier in the week. Well, the problem was a lot of people didn't like my answer. So I thought I would help explain it on here. So what is the best process to ensure that the malware is completely eradicated? Update the antivirus signatures, run a full scan, install some anti-malware software and perform a malware removal, recover from a restore point from a date prior to the infection, format the hard drive and reinstall the operating system from a clean backup, or my favorite, grab a hammer, can of lighter fluid, some ball bearings, go to town. So a lot of people did not like my answer on this one. So I thought I would help you tell you why I chose the one that I chose. Before I tell you what I did, let's see what you have answered so far. A number of you have said D. And So some of you said A, update signatures. B, some of you said B, do anti-malware. C, 12%. See, even here, we're sort of split. Although 67% of people said D, format the hard drive, reinstall the operating system from a clean backup, which is the right answer. I'm sorry to say. Some of you are even saying, I don't know about that. I can do anti-malware pretty quick. That I think is the right idea. I think that's what we should do. The answer is absolutely D. And it is the question you have to pay attention to. And this is important just in general on the A+ exam. Let's read through the question again. You have identified a malware infection on a critical computer at your organization. So already we know this is an important computer. This is not something we can mess around with. And the question is, even if we didn't know that, the question is, what is the best process to ensure that the malware is completely eradicated? And by best, completely eradicated is what we're talking about. The best way to ensure, not that we got rid of it, we think, not that we did some things that we believe might have gotten rid of it. What's the best way to ensure the malware is completely, I use the word specifically, eradicated? And that is why, because with malware, you can run antivirus on it and tell it to clean it up. You can take anti-malware software, scan it through, which is not a trivial process. That takes time as well. It's still, and you tell it, clean it up. It may not necessarily get rid of the malware. Because once malware is on your system, it can open the doors for other malware to get in. It can put information on your machine that your anti-malware knows nothing about. 0-day is a very big problem right now. Even restore points on your computer, these days, malware is smart enough to infect your restore point. So even if you go back to a restore point on your computer and restore it, you're still going to have this malware issue. You still will never know. Even if the malware, the anti-malware software you have works really well, even if it's really good anti-malware software, you still never know if you really eradicate. The only way to ensure that the malware is completely eradicated is to format the hard drive, nuke everything, nuke it from space. Boom, it's gone. Nothing. Blow it all away. Take the backup from last night that you did. See how this is coming back to you? You've got your backup. You imaged this whole system last night or last week or last month. You take that whole image, you re-image the system. Now, some of the arguments that I got from people are like, anti-malware is good. It probably is, but you can't be certain. And if this is a critical machine, you can't afford for this machine to get infected again because you missed something, then do it this way. Another person said, well, gosh, it takes a long time to do a backup. If it's taking you a long time to restore from a backup, maybe you should think about doing some other types of backups. As I mentioned earlier, things like imaging these days are very, very quick at restoring. In fact, I can restore an image. I bet you I can restore an image faster than it takes anti-malware to run on most systems. If you ever do a full scan with anti-malware, it takes hours to do a full scan with anti-malware on most systems. Some are faster, some are slower, but I've got a laptop here. It takes forever to do a full scan with anti-malware. I can do a restore from an image in 30 minutes. Done. Boom. If you can't do a restore from image in 30 minutes, you need to think about how you're doing backups. D is the right answer with this one. And I get that people are saying, but gosh, I don't want to nuke the whole machine. I don't want to rebuild the operating system. That's so painful. Please, no, I don't want to do that. Yes, you got to do that. That's the only way to be sure to be able to do that piece. So think about that as you're going through using these things. Now, recognize we're at the top of the hour. We're going to keep going. I got another bunch of questions about the A+ exam we're going to talk about. This will be another one of those where we go into extra innings. I appreciate the people that have to leave after an hour. You've got other things to do. I'm with you. That's fine. We're going to keep going. And you can always go back and watch the replay. I generally have them up in the next 24 hours. So let's go through questions about the questions. Questions about the exam. I get probably as many questions about the exam itself as I do questions about the content that's on the exam. So I wanted to go through a few of these. Now, obviously, your first choice for anything about the CompTIA exam is going to be the CompTIA website. I'm not associated with CompTIA. I'm not a CompTIA member. I don't give them dues. They don't talk to me. They don't tell me anything. I have no special input or information about CompTIA. And I like it that way. I like to be independent as far as that's concerned. So I have no way to know what goes on at CompTIA other than things you tell me. Very often you're telling me when a new version of the exam requirements document is uploaded. You're telling me what you hear when you call to people. So it's very nice. Keep those cards and letters coming. It's very useful because I have absolutely no way to know what's going on. But I do hear certain things, and there are certain things we can look up. One was typically how many questions in each category where there'll be. Randy asked that. And you saw before when we looked through the exam requirements document, we don't know exactly how many questions are there, but we have a pretty good idea of what the mix is. For instance, on the 227.01, 8% of the exam is security. And if you're wondering what that amounts to, there's a little bit of leeway here. If you go out to CompTIA's website and you look at what's there, we're going to go out to CompTIA.org, I think, and go out there. We're waiting for it. We're waiting for it. We're waiting for it. Here you go. So on the chat room, do I back up my hard drive? Absolutely. I back up my hard drive, especially because all these things are here. On the website for CompTIA, we're going to go down to CompTIA A+, and it tells you right here on the A+ page everything you need to know about it. There are 100 questions on each exam, both the essentials and the practical application. That's the 227.01 and the 227.02. 100 on each exam, 90 minutes each. Your passing score is 675 on the essentials, 700 on practical application. Well, that's 67.5%, and that's 70%. No, it's not. It is not. The score you can get on the exam is somewhere between 100 and 900. What? What is that about? What is this crazy numbers that they have there? Not exactly. When you start the exam, you get 100 points immediately. Every question is worth a different number of points. So you can't miss or make a certain percentage and expect to get a certain score, because you may miss the most important and most valuable questions that may work against you, and you may get right the ones that aren't worth very much. So you can't look at that. You could say, well, I got 90 questions correct. That's 90%. No, not necessarily. So don't be trapped there. But it does help you understand what the distribution will be for this. If 8% of our questions on the 701, 8% are on security, that's about 8 questions, because there's 100 on each exam. Math is easy for that one. So you can expect about 8 security questions on the exam. Now, we don't know that for sure. They could go a little bit off, a little bit back, but it's all there. If you're on that A+ website, there's a section over here that says, see what the exam covers. You can't see it because my big head's there. Over on the right side, how about I get rid of my head? There we go. See what the exam covers is right there on the page. If you click on that, it takes you to a page where you fill in this form. That is the exam objectives. So I've talked throughout this A+ study group. Get the exam objectives. Download the exam objectives. Make sure you get CompTIA's exam objectives document. That's where you get the exam objectives document. It's all right there. And it's important to know that those are there. So if you're trying to figure out how many security questions should I expect to see on the 701, 100 questions, 8%, there's 8 questions on there. So that's what that is. In the chat room, Vision for Day says, I received so many questions that weren't in the study guide. They weren't on this exam requirements document, and I got a great score. So what's the deal with that? One of the things that CompTIA will do is in your exam, they will ask you questions that don't count at all. There's 0 numbers of points associated with it. If you get it wrong, it doesn't count. If you get it right, it doesn't count. 0. So in fact, prior to Windows 7 being added to the exam, people were saying, I'm getting a ton of Windows 7 questions. They didn't say we had to know Windows 7, and I'm getting a ton of Windows 7 questions. Well, they were trying some new questions. And they wanted to see what your answer was going to be on those questions. So sometimes they'll try things out that way. They absolutely did the same thing for the 801. I'm sure people are getting virtualization questions. I'm sure they're getting other questions about newer technologies. That's what happens when those things are going through. Another question in the chat room, a couple have come up already. You know, I could download the 801 questions right now. Yep, you absolutely can. If we pop back, one of the questions I got was, when will they stop administering 701 and 702 and start allowing me to do 801 and 802? Well, that's a good question. Don't know. If you've been out to download the exam requirements for 801 and the exam requirements for 802 are absolutely available. You can download them right now. You can't take the test. It's not available. You can't sign up for it. You cannot take the test anywhere. You can't do anything with 801 and 802 yet. But obviously, 801, 22801, and 22802 will obviously be the next generation of CompTIA exams. One of the other question in the chat room, so, when's that going to expire, so to speak? When's the last time I could take those? Usually what happens is when CompTIA comes out and says, guess what, everybody? New exam, 801 and 802 are now available. You can take those exams. What they usually do is still allow you to take the 701 and 702 exam. In the case of the Network Plus that recently updated, you can take it for 9 months. So they give you this great ramp period. So if you've been studying and studying and studying, they aren't just going to come out and say, new exam, all that studying you did is no good, haha. Nope, they won't do that to you. They'll give you plenty of time to finish your studying and take the exam. So we certainly expect that there will be a number of months once CompTIA comes out. They came out today and they did it the same way they did Network Plus, then it would be until the end of the year and a little after. So you could go through December and still take the 700 series exam. I don't know that for certain. They might change it this time. They may not give you any ramp. I don't know. But in the past, that's the way they've done it. I think they'll probably do it this way again. That's 9 months is what they did with Network Plus. I don't know what they're going to do with A+. So don't take my word for that. Again, I have no inside baseball on any of this. I'm as clueless as you are. All I know is what they've done in the past. And I expect they'll do the same thing for A+. It's probably their most popular exam. What is one of the questions in the chat room? So what's different? The Good Vibe asks, what's the difference between 700 series exam and 800 series exam? Last month's study group, I went into excruciating detail about exactly what was difference between them. I put them side by side. I looked at all the different requirements. I told you what was new. I told you what remained. I told you what dropped off. So you can always go back at the bottom of the A+ videos that are on my website. The very bottom is every study group I've ever done, a replay of every single one of them. You can go back and look at all of them. And I've got broken down in the description of each one of those. It tells you exactly what's covered in that study group. So you'll be able to see that part. So one of the questions, and NetDemin in the chat room is talking about CEs and continuing education. Another question I got is, I heard through the grapevine, through some method, I heard the certificate is good for 3 years and then it expires. Is that true? Didn't used to be true. Up until January of a year ago was you get your A+ certifications good for life. But the industry and in fact, international standards have mandated that if you are giving out a certification in technology, if you want anybody to take this and use it for anything going forward, it needs to expire because technology changes. So Cisco does this, ISC Squared does this, the VMware does this, everybody does this. They all expire ultimately. Even Microsoft does it to a degree, but Microsoft's is not a 3-year thing. Microsoft, your certification is good, but it's for a type of technology. So when the technology goes away, your certification's no good. My MCSE and Windows NT, I'm so proud of that. It's no good. Windows NT, not really worth very much anymore to be able to know that. You have to stay up to date. So those things become pretty important. There is a website or web page, the CompTIA website, that talks about staying certified. And we talked earlier about CEs being able to do this. These continuing education units that you can get. Those CEs are things that you can do by watching this and putting blog entries on and creating documents and presenting on trade shows yourself, doing those types of things. Those are out there and available to be able to do that. Another way to stay up to date, and not a lot of people realize this, if you're participating in the CE program, that means you're going to keep renewing your certification. If you have no intention of ever recertifying, it's going to go 3 years and drop off. Don't participate in the CE program. For A+, you pay $25 a year to keep that certificate, those CEs, and build the CEs up on that. If you're not planning to do that, don't pay the $25. But if you think it's important to you to maintain that certification, pay $25 a year. If you were to take your Network Plus, it automatically renews your A+. If you then take your Security Plus, it automatically renews your A Plus and your Network Plus. If you then take a Microsoft exam, a Cisco exam, there are a few out there that apply to this, or even the upper level security exam, the new one from CompTIA, that one also will renew, but you have to be participating in that continuing education program to be able to say that. So some nice things to be able to use that certification. There's a lot to learn about that piece. In previous study groups, I talked in detail about that. It may be time to do that even now, to go back over that. Maybe next month we'll do something like that. So you do have to do more than just watch my videos to keep it certified. And they detail all of that at the website. If you search for CompTIA certification CEs, you'll go right to the CompTIA website where they talk about the details. There's a very detailed frequently asked questions to be able to do that. So the Good Vibe asked, so does this CE apply even now to the 3-year certificates? That's exactly what it applies to. So if you have the new exam that expires in 3 years, and you have signed up and are participating in the continuing education program, that's what applies here. It's doing all of those things that give you those extra credits that will ultimately renew. And I'll tell you, if you're working in IT, you're doing the things that you normally do in IT, you'll probably not even have to do anything else. You just have to do the things you normally do and tell CompTIA you did them, and you'll have certainly enough of those credits to be able to recertify for your A+ exam. Me, I'm not doing it. Somebody asked earlier, am I participating in this certification exam? I'm not. I take my A+, and I'm waiting, when the next A+ comes out, whether I need it or not, I'm taking it because I want to report back to you on how things go with that. So I'm just going to take it every time there's a new one. Why not? So that's me, but I'm weird that way. So that's what is going on that side as well. Someone asked, what happens if you get a voucher for the exam, you fill in the details, then you fail the test? What happens? Well, there goes your voucher. That's it. You pay some money, it goes away. So that's one of the challenges you have. If you're spending money on that piece and turns out you fail your exam, you got to pay for it again. There's no do-overs. Now, you might be working with a program at a university where they have a special arrangement with CompTIA that might give you a do-over, or they might help you pay for that do-over. That's different. But if you are independent person like me, you pay your money, you take your test, pass or fail. If you want to take it again, you got to pay again. So no way around that. The voucher does not cover retakes. Nope. So more pressure, just what you needed, isn't it? Put more pressure on. One of the questions also in the chat room, Kyle asks, now what are the prospects then for an A+ and Network Plus certified people? Many companies said you got to at least have those things. It's a bare bones prerequisite. What other certs are useful? It's not just certs. I think A+ and Network Plus are very, very good for entry level. Security Plus, maybe not to some degree. Yes, entry level. I guess it depends on the job. There's 3 things I think you need. One is certifications. Absolutely. I think it gets people's eyes. You need an education in a formal program, a formal degree, a technical degree, an associate's degree, some type of formal post-high school certification or post-high school of training, of higher learning, I guess is the words I'm looking for. If you go to a college, a university, a technical college, or some type of formal program that goes outside the scope of certifications, one that's something you're spending years or more being able to show that's important to put on your CV. And the third thing is practical experience. You need some way to show that I've taken these things I've learned in a book and I've applied them to real world, and I can bring them right in and help you if you hire me. Those 3 things, that's your 3 pieces. It can't just be certs. It can't just be the pieces you have for education. Experience helps also. If it's entry level, maybe not so much. A lot of people will train you as you go, but it certainly helps. Those are the 3 things I would focus on if I were you. Would a bachelor's in computer programming be good if going into the computer tech world? I think any technical degree will help you going into IT or anything technical. My degree was in business management. I didn't get a management information systems degrees, which they called that back then. I didn't get a programming or a computer science degree, which is what they called that back then. Didn't get a technical degree at all. My first job was delivering cables and installing hard drives at a computer company right out of college. So might have helped me to have an MIS degree. I might have been able to go to work for a consulting firm, one of the big consulting firms at the time. It was like Arthur Andersen, those types of consulting firms. But I didn't have experience doing that type of thing necessarily. My grades weren't very good. Not a good student in my time. So they probably didn't like my GPA either. But I did get practical experience doing some of these hard drive installations. And sometimes you just have to get that first job. Get that first job. You can then apply everything back. Once you have the first job, nobody cares about GPAs anymore, thankfully. Sure, I'm glad about that. They're really pleased about that piece. It helps me a lot. Perhaps not the best student in being able to do that. That's one of the challenges is dealing with and understanding those three pieces. If you work on those three pieces, I think you'll be okay. Let's go to my link of the moment. One of the things I mentioned earlier was command lines. And if you like command lines, you want to go to the next level. There was a great story this week on Reddit. This is on, I gave you a bit.ly to get to it. bit.ly/cmdlines will take you to a Reddit. This is in the system administration Reddit subreddit, I think, the sysadmin subreddit, where what are some Windows command lines that everyone should know? And this was a really, really nice overview of some very technical command lines that people who are doing system administration today are using. And if you've never seen Reddit, it's a great website, reddit.com. There are subreddits on here. This subreddit, there's a subreddit for any topic you would ever want to know about. And this one happens to be for sysadmin. And it's a great subreddit that you can subscribe to. So when you go to Reddit, it pops up all the questions and messages today based on that subreddit. Some great information to have there that you can take advantage of out on Reddit. And this is some very interesting answers. Even on this one, with the person who posted, it says, here's a robocopy he does. Here's a DS query statement, export a list of items in an OU. Again, Active Directory pieces come into this. Forcefully close a program, killing all child processes, and forces it right there from the command line. You don't have to do it in your Explorer, being able to pop up your task manager and do everything there. Do it right at the command line. Boom. It goes right there. Very, very useful to have that piece there. So some great command lines. The next study group, there's another subreddit I'm going to talk about, but I thought that sysadmin subreddit fit very well. A little bit outside the scope of A+, I recognize, but certainly a nice one to have there. Well, as we're getting into the later part of the presentation, I wanted to ask one more question of you interactively. This question is pretty simple. What topic would you like to cover on the next A+ study group? And this is important for me to know. I want to understand from your perspective the things that are important to you. So as you type in and bring those up, we should start seeing them pop up on the screen as soon as I allow us to see them. I should probably pull up my screen so I can put them out and allow you to see that. We'll have a look at those. So send your response to pollev.com/Messler. Somebody said, want to know more about the 800 program. I absolutely think that would be a good one to have there as well. I think that'd be an excellent one to have there as well. A difference between IPv4 and IPv6, as many of you know, IPv4 is one of the ones that came through that's important to know about. Here I've got some of the responses coming up on my screen so I can pop them up. Who really let the dogs out? Gosh, thanks for sending that one through. You have to come up with a new one for next week. Can't just rely on who let the dogs out. Ports, networking, memory timings, combination between network and security. So some really good questions coming through. Cover more on specific operating systems and troubleshooting would be good to have there. I think that's a really good one too, to have that piece in there. Maybe we'll do some troubleshooting, some live troubleshooting on here. Difference between a work group and a domain. That was one of the questions that came up this week or this month that didn't make the cut, but I think that would be a good one. Viruses in greater detail, how to properly get rid of them. Boy, I agree. That would be an excellent one to have there. Let's have a look at this live text wall coming through. Boy, gosh, got a ton of these that have come through. Troubleshooting with diagnostic cards. How do you do what you do? Boy, that's a completely different study group altogether. More security, cloud technologies. That's going to be an important one for the 800 exam. Power supplies, AC/DC, Windows 7 home group. Home group's an interesting technology, and I think that's an important one we'll need to know. I'll have to look at the 800 exam, see if we have to know that piece. How to determine RAM speed. Boy, that's one that comes up quite a bit. And I did a previous study group where we went into the details. Maybe it's time to do that one again. I think it probably is. So a lot of great stuff in there. You guys are fantastic with giving this type of feedback. So 29 different ones. Wireless networking. Are most IT-based companies partial hiring students only with a CompTIA A+? Probably not only with, but certainly helps, doesn't it? Memory, computer power, those types of things. That's good. And this is a really good comment somebody made. Put up the topics and allow people to vote on it. Maybe we'll do that for next month. I'll put up the main topics that people are sending in, and you guys can pick and choose which ones are going to be important. I can kind of guess myself which ones of those are going to work very well for bringing up those things. So we will work on covering that particular set of things extremely well going through there. And some folks on the chat room said that this is really a good place to go. As I mentioned, the CompTIA website, get the objectives. Max Beta in the chat room says, absolutely know those objectives. I use them as a checklist. Go through the whole list and know from top to bottom exactly what you know and exactly what you don't know. It helps you know where to study. It helps you understand exactly when you should be taking the A+ exam. Very, very useful to see that. Well, let me let you know that if you want to get in touch with me, you want to follow what we're doing, you want to know whenever we go live with some of these events, you can follow us on Facebook at professormesser.com/Facebook. I'm also on Twitter. I like it when I get the Twitter messages coming through. I can @back you. I travel around with that. It's very mobile. I travel a lot, so it helps me a lot whenever I get Twitter messages from you that are very easy for me to get back in touch with you. professormesser.com/Twitter. And of course, our sponsors this week, GTS Learning at professormesser.com/freestyle. It's a great way to support Professor Messer, as well as supporting my friends over at GTS Learning that are doing a great job with their new freestyle product. Make sure you look at it. Some free things you can get there, and you can use it right away. Some interesting things they've got going on. Next week at this time, we're doing a Network Plus study group. So if you or someone you know is studying for their Network Plus exam, we're doing another one of these next week, exactly the same time, 1 o'clock Eastern time. If you go to professormesser.com/calendar, you'll be able to sign up for that. And if you've already signed up, it'll also give you an option to send me another question for the month that I can put into that list. Becomes really, really useful for that. So, as we're closing up here, let me also say thanks to you. Without all of your questions, we would never be able to do these study groups. Extremely useful to me. Keep sending me questions throughout the month. Keep letting me know what's going on. And as other things come up, absolutely tell me what's going on with those pieces. So this brings us to the end. Again, we went about 20 minutes over again, an hour and 20 minutes. I apologize for going a little bit longer than usual, but I think we went through some really great things. Thanks again for joining me. We had a great time again this month. We're going to do another one next month. Keep checking back for that. And we'll see you next time on the Professor Messer Live A+ Study Group.